If you're new to firearms, you're not alone. Most beginners start the same way. Some Americans with criminal convictions could soon be allowed to legally own guns. Sweeping gun control legislation passed at the midnight hour last week by state lawmakers. Excited, careful, and trying to do everything the right way. You pass the background check, bring your firearm home, and trust that you're now a responsible owner. And you are. But here's what nobody tells you early enough. Federal law doesn't give much room for simple mistakes. Even a small oversight can place you in a situation you never meant to be in. A lot of good people run into trouble not because they acted recklessly, but because nobody explained how these federal rules actually work. And ignoring them doesn't just create headaches. It puts your record, your rights, and your peace of mind at risk. That's why we're breaking this down clearly, calmly, and in a way that helps you stay ahead. Think of this video as a guide from someone who wants you to be fully prepared. No stress, no panic, just straight talk about the traps new owners fall into without realizing it. We're counting down the 5 federal mistakes beginners make the most, ending with the one that causes the fastest, harshest trouble. Don't skip around. One section might be the exact thing that protects you when most people hear the phrase "not allowed to own a gun." They think of serious criminals or violent offenders. But the federal system doesn't frame it that simply. There's an entire list of categories, some obvious, some surprising, that can block someone from legally owning or even handling a firearm. And many beginners don't realize they fall into one of these categories until they're standing in front of paperwork that says otherwise. For example, a single misdemeanor involving family arguments can lead to a lifetime ban. Not a felony, just a misdemeanor. Or take the situation with marijuana. Your state may allow it. Your friends may use it openly, and you might assume it's harmless. But under federal standards, admitting to marijuana use places you in a restricted category. That means even touching a firearm can create legal trouble. Then there are restraining orders, certain mental health rulings, and old charges people barely remember. Federal records, don't forget them even when a person has moved on. And this is where beginners often get blindsided. They walk into a gun shop, fill out Form 4473, and check a box without thinking much of it. But that form is not a casual questionnaire. If your answer doesn't match what the federal system already knows, you could face charges for providing false information. There was a case where a new owner believed a past issue had been cleared. In his mind, it was over. But the federal records disagreed. When his paperwork was reviewed, the government flagged the discrepancy, and he suddenly found himself answering questions he never expected. So here's what matters. Before buying or carrying, take a moment to understand where you stand under federal rules. It's not about assuming the worst. It's about avoiding a situation that could have been prevented with a little clarity. This is one area where guessing wrong can cost you rights you can't get back. A lot of new gun owners are surprised by how quickly the rules change the moment they cross a state border. You can leave your driveway completely legal, not doing anything risky, and still step into federal trouble just by entering another state with the wrong setup. And the people who run into this problem most often aren't careless. They're the ones who thought they were doing everything right. Here's where beginners get caught. Federal rules for handgun transfers across state lines are not the same as the rules inside your home state. Even if a shop in another state is happy to sell you a handgun, that doesn't mean you can just buy it and drive home. Federal expectations require that the handgun be transferred through a licensed dealer in your own state. If you skip that step, you've already crossed into a violation without realizing it. And this isn't some rare technicality. In a recent national review, over 398,000 firearm purchases were denied over just 2 years for federal reasons. A big part of those denials came from paperwork or location mistakes buyers simply didn't understand. And when a purchase gets flagged, it doesn't just fade away. It can lead to follow-up questions, checks, and in some cases, charges. Travel adds another layer of risk. A beginner sees a good price across the border, buys the firearm, places it in the car, and heads home thinking everything is fine. But the moment they cross that state line without the proper transfer, the law sees that gun as improperly acquired. And if they get pulled over for something small like a broken tail light, that firearm becomes the center of the conversation instantly. This isn't about intent, and it's about the rules behind how firearms move from state to state. If you find a gun you want in another state, there is a safe way to do it. Have the seller ship it to a licensed dealer in your home state, and finish the process there. It takes a little extra time, but it keeps you completely clear of a federal charge that can start with nothing more than a short drive. Owned a firearm, you know how tempting it is to start customizing it right away. It's part of the excitement. You swap a grip, upgrade the sights, maybe add something you saw online that everyone swears makes shooting easier. And for the most part, that's completely normal. But this is also the point where a lot of beginners accidentally step into federal trouble without realizing they've crossed a line. What throws people off is how fast a simple change can shift the way the federal system views your firearm. You might not be altering the gun's purpose, but the rules look at configuration, not intention. Something as basic as putting a stock on a pistol or switching to a shorter barrel can move the firearm into a restricted category. Add certain attachments without understanding how they're classified, and suddenly the setup in your hands doesn't match what's written in your paperwork. And here's the part beginners rarely expect. You don't even have to assemble anything to raise concerns. If you own a group of parts that can be combined into a restricted configuration, that alone can invite trouble. It's called constructive possession, and it catches new owners off guard all the time. You might think, I'm not planning to build anything illegal. But the federal system doesn't look at your plans. It looks at what's physically possible with what you own. Federal reports show that more than 14,000 people were charged with firearm-related federal violations in a single year. And not all of them involved violent behavior. Some were tied to possession or configuration issues, meaning people got in trouble simply because they didn't understand how a few parts changed the legal status of their firearm. Yeah, so before you click add to cart on that new part, pause for a moment. Make sure the change keeps your setup within the safe zone. Most upgrades are perfectly fine, but a few can lead to questions you never want an answer. A quick check now saves you from a conversation later that won't go your way. Quick pause here. If this video is already opening your eyes, stick with me. The next rules hit even harder, and missing them has cost real gun owners their rights overnight. And hey, if you're getting value from this, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss these breakdowns. Alright, back into it. Gun owners arrested. This is the mistake almost every beginner makes at least once. And honestly, it usually happens on a totally normal day. You're driving to the range, heading home from work, or just running errands with your firearm in the car, and without doing anything wild, you've stepped straight into a federal issue. The scary part is that nothing about it feels risky until someone with a badge points it out. Federal expectations for transport are actually pretty simple, but most beginners never hear the rules explained clearly. Your firearm should be unloaded. It should be in a locked case. Not the glove box, not the center console, not tossed under the seat like a phone charger and your ammo. That should be stored separately. Sounds easy, right? It is. But the moment you cross into a state that takes these rules more seriously, the tiny habits you built at home suddenly don't protect you anymore. Transport violations show up during the most boring traffic stops imaginable. A missing brake light, rolling through a stop sign, an expired plate you forgot to renew. The officer walks up, spots a loaded firearm sitting within reach, and just like that, the entire tone of the stop shifts. Federal rules don't care that you're a good person, that you bought the firearm legally, or that you had zero bad intentions. They care about one thing, how that firearm was stored in that moment. And the numbers tell the story. In recent years, thousands of firearm-related arrests started not with crime, but with simple roadside encounters. People weren't threatening anyone or acting dangerous. They just didn't store the gun the way federal expectations required. If you want a routine traffic stop to stay routine, build one habit. Unload, lock, separate. Treat every trip, even the short ones, like you might cross into a stricter zone. Do that and the firearm becomes a non-issue before the conversation even begins. New gun owners make. This one sits at the top for a reason. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't sound illegal. And honestly, most people who break this rule think they're helping someone, not hurting anyone. That's exactly why it catches beginners so quickly. It feels harmless right up until the moment it isn't. Here's the situation. You walk into a gun shop, fill out the form, pay for the firearm, and walk out with something you chose, right? Well, the federal system expects that the person filling out the paperwork is the person who actually wants the gun, not someone holding cash from a friend, not someone doing a favor, not someone picking up a gun for a cousin who doesn't want to deal with the hassle. The rules don't bend for that. And the question that gets people in trouble is painfully simple. Are you the actual buyer? It looks innocent, but your answer carries real weight. If you check yes, but the gun is really for someone else, that's a false statement. And that false statement is enough for federal charges, even if the other person is completely legal to own a firearm. To give you an idea of how seriously this is taken, national reports estimate tens of thousands of attempted straw purchases every year. That's why federal agencies look at this rule so closely. It's one of the easiest ways for guns to slip into situations they were never meant for, and they treat it as a major red flag. Beginners get tripped up because the setup feels so normal. A buddy hands you cash and says, "Hey, grab that one for me." A relative wants a certain model and asks you to use your ID because you know the paperwork better. It feels like no big deal until the gun gets traced and your name is the one tied to it. And trust me, the questions that follow aren't casual. If you want to stay clear of this trap, keep it simple. You buy for yourself. A real gift is fine, but only if you choose it, you pay for it, and you walk in, planning to own it before giving it away. Anything else is the fastest way a beginner ends up in a conversation they never wanted to have. I know this isn't one of the rules from the countdown, but it's something we have to talk about. Think of this part as the quiet conversation every beginner should hear before they ever run into trouble. So here we are, not to lecture you, but to make you more aware, more confident, and a lot more protected as a new firearm owner. Because let's be honest, federal gun rules can feel confusing even to people who've been around firearms for years. And if you're new, it's completely normal to look at all these expectations and think, why does this feel more complicated than it needs to be? Trust me, you're not alone. Plenty of beginners have asked themselves the same question. Most people assume the complicated part of gun ownership is the firearm itself, learning how it works, how to shoot, how to clean it. But the real challenge is understanding the rules that sit quietly in the background, shaping what you're allowed to do without ever making themselves obvious. They don't send reminders. They don't jump out at you with big warnings, and they definitely don't adjust to match everyday common sense. They simply wait. And the moment someone accidentally bumps into one, that's when the confusion hits. This is where beginners feel the most frustration. You can follow the advice you've been given, believe you're doing everything correctly, and still discover that there was a detail no one ever bothered to mention, a detail that could have pushed you into trouble you never intended. That doesn't make you reckless. It just means the system was never explained in simple human language. So let's fix that. When you buy your first firearm, you're taking on far more than a new piece of equipment. You're accepting a commitment that follows you everywhere. In your car, inside your home, across state lines, and in moments so ordinary you wouldn't think twice about them. And while that responsibility might sound heavy at first, it actually gives you something incredibly valuable once you understand it. Predictability. When you know the expectations, you stay in control and ownership becomes far more comfortable. Think of it the same way you'd approach a powerful tool. You don't fear it, you respect it. You don't try to memorize every technical detail. You just build reliable habits. Those habits are what protect you when something unexpected happens or when life gets busy and you're not thinking about rules in the moment. Most beginners make mistakes because they rely on habits that feel perfectly harmless. Maybe they store their firearm the way a friend does, unaware that their friend's state has different rules. Maybe they follow old advice from someone who hasn't checked updated requirements in years. Maybe they assume that the rules in their hometown must apply everywhere else. These choices don't make anyone irresponsible. They simply show that the person is still new to the world of ownership and learning their way. There's nothing wrong with being new as long as you're willing to grow into the responsibility that comes with carrying a firearm. Here's the mindset that separates confident, safe owners from those who end up in situations they never expected. You don't need perfect knowledge. You need reliable awareness. Awareness of where you're going. Awareness of how you're storing your firearm. Awareness of what changes the moment you cross a border on a map. Once you build that awareness, everything gets easier. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop feeling unsure every time you drive somewhere new. And you stop worrying about whether you might be missing something important because now you actually understand what the law expects from you. And here's something beginners rarely hear, but absolutely should. Every experienced firearm owner started exactly where you are standing today. Curious, unsure, and trying to figure out what matters. You're not behind. You're building your foundation. Federal rules feel confusing because they were created over many decades, changed repeatedly, and written in ways that don't always match real-life conversations. That's why it takes a little patience to understand them. Not perfection, not fear, just patience. And once you understand the responsibility you've taken on and you build the habits that keep you safe, the entire system becomes far less intimidating. You don't rely on luck. You don't rely on vague advice. You rely on clarity. And that's exactly what this video is here to give you. And that wraps it up, guys. But before you click away, hear me out. You're now ahead of a lot of new gun owners who walk straight into these mistakes without anyone warning them. And I want you to stay ahead. These laws will keep shifting. Agencies will keep changing the rules. And the only way to stay safe is to stay informed. So answer this for me right now. Which one hit you harder? A, the transport mistake, or B, the straw purchase trap? Drop A or B in the comments so I know what to break down next. Your support is what keeps this channel moving, keeps these updates coming, and keeps gun owners protected. See you in the next one. Until then, keep your awareness sharp and keep supporting gun law updates.